Great.
Okay. Now it says we're recording take 3 of conversation with Amrita and Beth. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone and welcome. My name is Amrita Devaya and I am Head of External Affairs and Engagement at the Cabinet Office. I am very, very excited to be here today at Wellness Engaged, and I'm delighted to be joined by Beth Goddard. Beth, do you want to introduce yourself?
I will do. I am Beth Goddard. I'm a trainer, facilitator, coach. I work in the social sector and predominantly with young people, so have a breadth of experience dipping into lots of different organisations, lots of different pockets of society, and work with people to help them become the best version of themselves and really lead in their own lives and the people around them. So yeah, delighted to be here with Am, and we're just going to have a conversation and see what we find.
Absolutely. So we may have pitched this session, I think, around how we can be more connected as leaders to our teams, and think about how in knowing the people that we work with, in knowing each other, how we can support everyone that we work with to be better for themselves, for the organisations, and in themselves as well. So as Beth says, I think we're just going to have a bit of a conversation and see where it takes us. And if you have any questions, we will be answering them on Twitter afterwards.
Great. So given that we've titled this The Heart of the Matter, Am, I wonder what it is that you want to say.
The internet
is back. It was a beautiful screen grab of your lovely face, but it was right at the opportune moment. But I'm going to suggest that we just continue, and you know, if that happens a few times, we may stop and start again. But hopefully, you'll just have an ease of watching us for the next 20 minutes or so. So, as I was just saying, we entitled this piece "The Heart of the Matter." So I wonder what it is that you want to say, Am, that is the heart of the matter.
I think when the team approached us and asked what is it that we would like to talk about and what would this session achieve, one of the topics that came to mind was this idea of connection in a very remote world where we're working like this with glitchy internet, with people who've got videos on, people who've got videos off, people joining organisations, leaving organisations. In a time where we're not physically close to each other, how do we build those connections, and how do we make sure that the people that we work with, people that we lead, feel like they belong to something, and in turn feel like they're able to engage and be honest about who they are. And I think, based on our conversations over the years, but in particular in the lead up to this, I think it's all about just getting to know people. And the heart of the matter really is who are the people, what makes them tick, who are you, what makes you tick, and how do you align those two to support the successful delivery of whatever your organisation is there to do.
And I wonder, just as I'm listening to you speak, you know, that alignment piece, who are the people, who's the organisation, how do those two things come together? I wonder if you can give some examples of where you've seen that work really effectively, but also maybe some examples where it's not working, and that's what's kind of brought you to the heart of the matter, being this is about people, it's about connection, it's about actually developing those relationships that are founded in trust, because is that the thing that creates that output, that productivity, that efficiency, etc.
100%. I think trust is so important when it comes to working with people. If you think about the relationships that you hold that are important to you, the relationships that I hold that are important to me, they are all founded in trust. And the ones that really flourish are the ones where we understand each other and we can see where our values match, and where we're able to learn from each other and provide, I guess, that consistent, speaking particularly about our relationship, Beth, but that consistent ability to challenge but also support. And I think there shouldn't be anything really different in the way that we work with the people that we either manage in our teams or lead in our teams, or the organisations that we work for. And actually keeping trust at the centre of that is so important. Again, I can only speak from from my own experience, and one thing that I've definitely noticed and definitely been aware of over the past year is that um, regardless of what you do and regardless of where you work, everybody has found this year hard. We've been separated from friends and family in a way that I don't think any of us imagined we would be, or for as long as we have been. We have been working remotely, so we're not getting that that's almost downtime at work where you have, the informal conversations. I would say at the water cooler, but that approach to absolutely, yeah, and people are finding it really, really difficult to articulate some of that underlying anxiety that just sits in the day to day, because we are living through a global pandemic. It's in the news all the time, it's in our social media feeds, it's in every conversation we have. And that hasn't reduced in the past year by any stretch of the imagination. And that constant barrage of information talking about the uncertainty of the world is just an anxiety that we are living with. And as leaders, how do we take the time to get to know, as I said, what drives our people and the people we work with, but also how do we support them with some of this other stuff that just, none of us could have ever foreseen was going to be part of our everyday lives in the way that it absolutely hasn't. And again, I say, I can only talk from my own experience, but what I've seen that has worked is taking that time to actually speak to people. So putting in informal conversations, talking to, members of your team, asking them about their lives, what are they excited about? What are they doing on a weekend? Where are they? What are they watching? What are they, who are they speaking to? Are they able to go outside? Are they able to to see friends and family again, and then building that rapport and really connecting with people. We are living in a virtual world. As I said, you can talk to people in all manner of ways, whether it's a text message, a phone call, a video conference, an Instagram message, but actually, are we really connecting with the heart of those people and the heart of what's going on? And if we aren't, how are we making time to do that in order to be more present in our working lives, in the lives of our teams, and supporting them by knowing them to be better?
And do you think something you just said really interested me then, that taking the time to speak to the heart of that person? Have you found within your own working world moments or times where there is a conflict in that between the organizational objectives, the agenda, the thing that needs to be achieved, versus the needs of that individual, who there might be a mismatch? As a leader of teams, and speaking to our relationship, I have known you a long time. We have evolved into something where I can just know what you're thinking, or know the question to ask, or the support, the challenge. I love it. We don't work together, but there is a symbiosis in our thinking that enables us to continue to support each other. That really works. But within the context of an organization which we don't sit in, I'm just curious if you notice sort of a conflict between the needs of the organization, the needs of the person, and how you might manage that.
Yes, and I think I'd be really surprised if you asked that question of anyone who has has managerial responsibilities, that they haven't come across that situation. I think it is a wonder and a golden unicorn of a situation if everything aligns and everything is easy. The reality of the matter is people are different. People react to situations differently, and there is a responsibility, I think, when you line manage people. Like, it's a responsibility not only for yourself, because you're learning about other people and you're learning who you are in different contexts as a manager, but equally you're responsible for someone else's career and someone else's happiness in their day to day. And for me, I frequently, this only works very visually, but I frequently do this to describe what it is to be a manager, which is that you're pushing you're balancing some of the stuff that's coming from above, so the organizational needs, context, hierarchy and leadership, and you're balancing that way and protecting the people that my hands weren't quite on camera, were they? And you're protecting the people that you manage in a way that gives them space to grow, flourish and deliver. But equally, you are the conduit that brings the two bits together. You're the piece of the golden thread, the piece of string, whatever you want to call it. And where there is that conflict, I think there is a responsibility for people in leadership who are managing teams to really understand the people that they're working with, because where that disconnect happens, it is only amplified if you don't know the people that you're working with. And in turn, that's where you see that disheartenment in the teams. That's where you see that lack of productivity. That's where you see people feeling like they are not appreciated, or being forced to do things that they don't feel comfortable in doing. But building that trust, building that open, honest conversation, providing that support, providing what is, again, not being a professional in the HR world, but I believe it's called psychological security in the workplace. But providing that, and knowing that your team can challenge as they need to, but equally understand that sometimes there are things that have to happen. Like how you build that and how you develop that all comes down to trust of each other, of the team. Trust that the person that is asking something of you understands who you are, why you might not be able to deliver, why you need a different deadline, why there may be pushback, and is then able to protect you from what's coming above. So, for example, managing people with different caring responsibilities. If you don't know your team, and you don't know that, one of them has to leave at 4:30 to make sure that they're able to pick up their child from school every day, and a deadline is coming in that is, we need this at 4:30. You're not going to understand. You're not going to be able to build that into the way that you plan and look after your team. And I think that's where people feel like they're not appreciated, or that they're being that they are not part of something, or they feel like they're being managed out of situations. And part of that is because you just don't know the people, and you don't know their context. And learning that context and knowing your people is the easiest way to get the best out of your teams and have the happiest teams, which I think is also something that we all strive for.
No, I absolutely, I do agree with that. I think what just popped into my head then, and this is only based on some of the work that I've been doing recently. So just for context for everybody else, is I work with organizations, with teams, doing psychometric profiling, doing team development stuff, really helping to build this connection, this heart of the matter piece. And somebody said something quite recently. They said, I don't bring me to work, I bring my work me to work. And I found that a really interesting concept, that they almost made a distinction between who I am at home and who I am at work. And I'm just kind of aligning that with what you were just saying. Have you ever experienced that play out, where there is almost like a barrier to creating that connection because they don't want to, because work is just work?
I was probably under the illusion when I first started my career that you are a professional being at work, and that is completely separate to who you are outside of work. And don't get me wrong, there are elements of my life that don't cross over into the work, but there is also a level of intimacy that has to be present in order to build that trust. Because if you're not authentic and you're not true to yourself, it is, I think, very difficult for other people to trust and respond in the same way. There is a lot of conversation, I think, and Beth, you will know as well. We talk a lot about being our authentic selves in the workplace, bringing your whole self to work. I think it's very difficult to draw a line under that when your workplace is also your home. It's exactly right. Like this is where I live. This is how do I separate the two? And I know that there are things that I have done that have felt awkward and difficult because I felt that I had to be someone else at work. And actually, the best version of myself is the true version of myself, which is, laughs a bit too loudly, finds ridiculous things funny, loves a chat, and drinks far too much coffee, and all of those things, the things that I bring to work. That doesn't take away from the fact that I'm good at what I do, that I take time to get to know the people that I work with, and I'm professional. But I can, again, only reflect on my own experiences. But when I first started work, did I change some of the words that I used? I changed, it was almost like my own thesaurus, because I felt that you know, my background, where I'm from, my educational background, all of that stuff didn't quite match with what I thought was expected of me in the workplace. And actually, that persona wasn't comfortable. I totally appreciate that there are lots of people who don't feel comfortable being entirely themselves in work, and it doesn't stop them being good at what they do. But the thing that I think is super important, the bit that I always strive to do, is being as true to yourself as you can be every day, because it's that authentic piece, that genuine piece, that speaking from the heart, I guess, as we would call it, is the bit that takes people on the journey with you. It builds that rapport, and it, you know, we're asking a lot of the time, especially, you know, I've come from an events background. You work with young people. We're asking people to think about behaviour change and delivering at pace and doing stuff that can be exhausting at times. And all of that building of teams, that collectivism that comes with that collaboration and that inclusion, is only in authenticity. And for as long as you pretend to be someone else, or you don't bring that authentic person to work, people are not going to engage with it, and they're not going to connect with it in the way that you want them to.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Again, just to expand on that thought a little bit more, the question I've got in my head is, how do you within an organization create that space, if you like, for whoever it is that's in your team or who's working with you or around you to feel as though they can be themselves, almost like, you know, the opening of an oyster. It's probably not the right analogy. It's too clasped shut, but this kind of gradual blooming. Let's go with a bloom. You know, this opening of a flower. And I'm also thinking about, you know, the work that I do, of going into lots of different organizations, feeling very different cultures, feeling and observing very different behaviors, and how do I create a space for people to step forward on a learning journey to really go, oh, this is what's at play, and how might I create that connection with me and the people around me in order to create that forward thinking, you know, space of growth to explore, to move towards a particular outcome. That was a lot of words. I think my question to you was, you know, how do you create that space? What are the things that you're actually doing to enable people to feel like they can bring that authentic self to work?
So two things. One is, I've actually got a question back for you, which is, you know, you do that though, right? You come into teams, I mean, you've come into my team, and created that space for people to be really honest about who they are, and what they find difficult, and what they feel that they're good at, and how do you use that and understand it to you know, really develop as an individual, but also as a team. So I guess my question to you is, how do you do that?
Thank you for the challenge. I will move out of facilitator role for a second then. How do I do that? That's a really good question. I think first and foremost, you know, I have really strong values, really strong principles of anybody who is in my space has a right to be there, has something of value to say, whether they say it, whether they choose to say it or not. That everybody within my learning space, it's their experience, it's their journey, and they will engage at the level that is right for them. And so I trust them to know what's right for them. And then maybe every now and again, just because I've been doing this for a very long time, I might just push on an edge to go, can I stretch this a little bit? You know, I think I've become skilled enough to know when somebody's moving towards panic, and to just go, no, we don't need to go there. We're going to stay in that stretch space. And I listen really hard to the things that are said and more importantly, the things that aren't said, you know, whether that is in language, whether that is in body, you know, the things that people's bodies tell me as a facilitator. So it's, yeah, I think, given you asked me the question, I think that is my key bit. It's I will use my ears to listen. And because I have been in lots of different spaces, I've now noticed, I suppose, more generic patterns of behavior in people. And some people, their preference is to not speak out loud. It is to sit back, it is to watch, it's to observe, it's to reflect, it's to do lots of internal processing. And that's okay. That's not to say that they're not learning. They're just doing it in a different way. To me, who I speak out loud, I want to engage in conversation. I want to explore things verbally and almost have a bit of a dance with another person, because that's just the way that my brain processes. Equally, there are other people who are really not comfortable with sharing emotion. So I'm not going to ask those people to share emotion, even though it might be my preference. Other people, you know, very expressive, gesticulate with their hands as you do and as I do. I know this about us both, and I'm just going to put my hands down for a second because we're on screen. But yeah, I think just to re-clarify and answer your question, it's about the way I create space for people to be themselves is by listening and making it okay for them to be themselves.
Yeah.
Whatever that might be, and having no judgment on that. And even when values don't align with mine, unless it's breaking the law or, you know, is rooted in scientific fact, then somebody's values are their values. I may not agree with them and I may want to challenge them, but I'm not going to judge them as being right or wrong, because that's not my job. You know, my job is to work on me and be the best version of myself, to create space for other people to be themselves, so that we can create that connection, get to the heart of the matter, right?
100%.
That was a lot of words. I'm going to spit it back.
But they were good words. No, they were good words. And I think, you know, for want of repeating you, which I think is testament to, as you said, there is such similarity in the way that we approach situations, and that, you know, at times we can almost you know, think and be speaking in synchronicity, but it is all about holding that space for people, isn't it? I think, and appreciating that the way that you would do something isn't always the way that someone else wants to do something. And, you know, as I said, I think there is huge importance in knowing who you work with and knowing your teams, because that's how, you know, we spend, again, not to just throw around numbers, but we spend, what, 40 odd hours a week with these people at work doing something. And, you know, for me, it's so important that space is enjoyable for everybody who's working in it. So I want to know if my teams are finding it hard. I want to know if the people that I work with are hating what they're doing at the moment. Like, I need to know that sort of information, because I can't support and I can't lead and I can't enact any sort of change if I don't know it. And that's another thing that I always say to the team, is that, you know, I'd rather know things early. I'd rather know when things are starting to go wrong, or you think something's going wrong, or you don't enjoy something, or something's not happening in the way that you want it to, because then I can protect you. Like, my role as a, you know, a head of a team is
Back to that, isn't it?
Is exactly, is how do I protect and how do I support? So you're providing that safety net, providing that that space for people to be themselves in the way that they want to be, and leading by example. Like, I will give you as much of me as you want. If you find me too much, that's fine. You don't have to have that bit. You know, if you want to just only use the time that we have together in the week to talk about tasks, that's fine. But if you actually just want to have a conversation as well, that is also fine. But I try my best to take the time to really, I guess, understand how people want, and I use the term managed very loosely, but how people want to be managed. Because it can't be the same for everyone else, because, you know, just because this is the way that I would do it, or this is the way that I like it, as you said, it can have a really negative impact on someone else. And I guess the other side of that is, in the context of now, just think how different this session would be if we were sat on a sofa talking to each other.
Oh, it'd be lush.
It'd be brilliant, right? But secondly, you know, as you said, it made me think you were talking about body language and, you know, really listening to what people say. I think that's the bit I find most difficult, is that not only do I not have any idea how tall anyone in my team is, because so many of them started since we've been in this
Wow.
never-ending lockdown. I'm 5'2", incidentally, so pretty short for all of you watching at home. But I also, I'm not able to read some of that body language. And I think the things that, you know, again, I don't know the figures, but a lot of our communication is is non-verbal. And I think I had held so much currency in the way that I engage with people based on being able to read that and understand body language and understand people because of the way that they, you know, they interact, or they hold themselves, or their breathing, or, you know, all the little things that you pick up when you're facilitating conversations with, especially with young people. And again, we probably should have done this at the start, but Beth and I met because we both worked with young people, and I used to facilitate conversations around around privilege and understanding where you stand within the societal structure. That is a deep conversation to have, and actually being able to understand people's body language and how they're interacting in that space, which you can't do in the same way on a video call, is the bit that I miss the most. Because that is actually, for me, the easiest way to get to know people, is that just
watch. Yeah. A couple of things pinged in my head as you were speaking. I'm going to park one for a second. I'll come back to it in a minute. But I'm interested in this, and I wonder, is the way that you approach creating connection downwards different to how you create connection upwards?
Surprisingly, no. For me, you know, it is all about building that trust, and I think that trust. There's an excellent formula that someone shared with me a couple of years back. Pardon?
You froze.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
that might just be my thinking face.
So we got there was an excellent formula that somebody shared with me a few years ago. Didn't hear what happened after that.
That was it. That was the end of. No, I'm joking, and I won't share it with you now. There is a brilliant formula that someone shared with me around trust, and it's that trust is, and I'm going to bastardize this slightly. Apologies, I'm probably not allowed to say that, am I? You might want to trim that bit as well. Is that trust is credibility plus consistency plus reliability divided by self-interest, and that as long as you are consistent and you are reliable, and your self-interest in a project, in the way that you engage people, in the way that you are building that relationship, is not evident in the way that it's for your own self-interest. So don't get me wrong, building relationships with people, there is always a personal interest in that, and it can be for all sorts of reasons. But what is that self-interest, and how is that manifested? But trust is consistency plus reliability. And I think there's an element of intimacy in there as well, like building those relationships, sharing enough of yourself. There should always be a little bit of you that you keep for yourself, because otherwise you're going to burn out and you're going to be exhausted. But yeah, consistent performance, consistently delivering, reliable, knowing that when something comes to you, you will, you know, you're consistently providing the same message, you are reliable in the delivery and the way that you react to situations, and there is, I say, that element of intimacy, that people know who you are, and that self-interest is removed, and you build trust. And for me, that works in both directions.
Okay.
And I think the outputs are slightly different, maybe. Because I think when you're looking after people, when you're responsible for other people's well-being in the workplace and their ability to do their roles, a lot of that consistency and reliability is how you manage requests, as I said, requests that come from above, how you manage that, your consistency in the way that you engage in situations, your availability as well, your consistency in turning up to one-to-ones, your consistency in what it is that you're asking people, where you're setting expectations, etc., etc. Whereas on the other side, the trust is built through the same manner, which is that consistent reliability, but actually it's a lot on that output. So you're building trust based on what you're delivering, but the only way you're able to do that delivery is because you've built the relationships with the people that you work with at peer level, in different organizations, through the people that you line manage.
Okay. And that's actually a really nice segue to this piece that I put up here.
Right.
Which is, how do you manage yourself when you are responsible for other people? The heart of the matter from an internal out perspective, rather than that's what I'm responsible for and now I need to respond to that. I'm just really curious, a little bit more context around that, just because you and I talk about that. How do we be the best version of ourselves in order that we can really have the impact with the people that we're working with and for? And I'm just curious about how you do that. And I know this will probably come back to me. I'm already uncomfortable because that's going to come back to me. I best think about an answer.
It is difficult, right? But I think so there are two things again there. One is I have always, and again, Beth, you'll have heard me say this on many occasions, have always been driven by what I describe as my Maya Angelou principle, which is, people won't remember what you said, they won't remember what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that sits at the crux of everything, regardless of whether it's a work relationship, a personal relationship, something, an external stakeholder, a volunteering organization, whatever it is. How you make people feel is the bit that people take away from you. So what am I doing every day to make people feel like they have space at my table, in my world? And I think that is.
Sorry, can I just make a slight provocative challenge? It's not even a slight provocative challenge, it's a provocative challenge. And this is only me putting my work hat on, but I'm so sensitive to this language. You can't make anybody feel anything. You may do something
fine, yeah,
have a response to, but you are not responsible for how you make somebody or how somebody else feels. It's a linguistic thing that we are all guilty of, but when I hear it, I can't help but flag it. So my apologies.
No, 100%. And I think that's the point, because the other thing, my two things, one is, as I said, the Maya Angelou principle of, considering how people feel in my presence. Secondly, is I can only control how I react. I can't control anyone else's behavior. So, and I can create and I can build space where people are able to be themselves, where people are able to articulate what it is that's going on with them. But I cannot control a person, right? As I say, I can't control how they behave. I can't control how they feel. But I can control what I put out there. And for me, that's really important. And taking that time to reflect on a conversation, the power of a pause. Again, Beth, you've heard me talk about that. Just because I feel something in the immediacy, is that something that needs to be articulated in the immediacy? And knowing when to share feedback and understanding how people like to receive that. That's another. That's probably something we should have spoken about earlier on, but that's hugely important. And then the second thing is all about my people. So how do I manage that? I have my people, you being one of them, people that I can sound off and think with and articulate deep frustration if I feel that, because that doesn't need to necessarily go back into, definitely doesn't need to go back to my workplace. It doesn't need to go back into my life. Again, context at the moment, we are living with our partners in a way that we, our families or people that we share houses with in a way that we never expected to. My fiance is great. However, when I signed up to be in a relationship with him, it wasn't 24/7, 400 days, 400 days back to back, working in a room together. He doesn't need that side of me, but I build that network of people who I know that I can. There are bits of it he will hear, because it's the nature of living with someone and talking about your day. But how do I manage it? I soundboard with people, people who I trust, people who don't always think the same as me. So, you know, Beth, you are someone who, as we said, we very much mirror each other, and there is a real, I guess, ebb and flow in the way that we approach situations. But there are also people in my network who I will use because they will challenge me, because they think hugely differently to me, and that's also really helpful because, again, one of the things that I think is really important is not hiring in your image. So don't hire people who think exactly like you. And in the same way, make sure that your network is built of people who don't think like you. Exactly to your point. You know, other people's opinions are their opinions, their values are their values. You can disagree with things, you can not have that alignment with someone, but having that challenge and seeing outside of your immediate echo chamber or immediate purview is so important, because people are different. Like, as I said, the golden unicorn is where everything aligns, and that never happens because people are involved. And you know, especially working in the live events environment, as I have done for the majority of my career, people will make things difficult. You can risk assess anything, but you can't risk assess, you know, well, I mean, you can try to, but you can't risk assess for the absolute, like, bonkers situation that a unique collection of individual people can create. And that's just, you know, part of the course. So yeah, appreciate and embrace the difference, I think.
It's quite interesting, just you talking about that network, and I'm putting it into the context of me. I have a life board. People who I have consciously chosen to be around me and my life and my contributions to the world, because I know that they will challenge me, they'll hold me to account, they'll provide that space for me to go and then go, have you thought about this? It's like, okay. And it's probably taken half of my career, actually, to get to a place where these are the right people. And that life board, I've noticed recently, is not necessarily the same as my personal sounding board. They're two different things, which is just an interesting concept for me. And certainly, you know, talking to your point of having those people within your network who think differently. This is going to sound like a random example, but I'm going to share it. You know, I have two Facebook profiles. One is very small. There is like 20 people on it. And the other one I've consciously curated with people who don't think like me. And actually, there's been some really interesting conversations. I'm not going to go into politics with you here. This is not the platform. It is definitely not around, you know, wellness engaged. So we'll not go down the rabbit hole. But watching different people stand really firm in their values and see that polarization happen, it's like, no, how can I use this to practice my skills of creating connection? Of going, that's fine, you think differently, but how can we respect that these different perspectives are just different? You know, they're not necessarily right or wrong. Some might be, as I say, if it's breaking the law, or if there's you know, systemic change that needs to happen because people are oppressed or, you know, taken advantage of, etc., etc. Now that's a value and a principle that I am absolutely stalwart in. I am not going to move my opinion or change my perspective, because that is what I can see and what I believe. But there've been some conversations where that challenge, that alternative perspective has made me go, I've not thought about it like that, actually. That's really helpful, because now I can see something from a slightly different perspective, which, pulling it back into, you know, creating connection with the people around me, helps me to create connections with the people who aren't like me, because I'm moving almost slightly closer to the way that they're looking at the world, which, if I can create the connection, means maybe they might step a little bit further to my perspective of the world. And that I find quite an interesting concept, I suppose. It's this kind of, I'm doing that with my hands. You can probably tell I speak with my hands. It's almost like this dance, and connection being a dance.
Trying to find how the jigsaw slots together, right?
Yeah.
My old team used to tease me. Obviously, this team don't. A lot of the time, I'm chopped off here, right? So they don't see what my hands are doing all the time. But my old team used to tease me and say that this is they're somewhere in between. and that is constantly, like, you know, when we're working through a problem and we're thinking about how do we find, I guess, that consensus almost, is
Mm,
like, where's the somewhere in between. And it is, um, in my mind, I can almost see like it's almost like a yin and yang, right, trying to find how it slots together. And you know, in the work that I do at the moment, it's so important to be able to find that middle ground. How are you bringing people to understand things, advocate for things, and feel things slightly differently, and look at it from what might be a completely different angle to the way I am looking at it, and figure out how you,
mm,
yeah, I guess, how you work it so that it does slot together and it does
mm,
make sense, and people can engage with it and feel connected to it,
mm,
because you've considered every element of how people might engage and connect.
mm. Quite interesting. Two pictures popped into my head then. I'll just share them. I think they've got slightly different applications to what we're talking about. One being a coin. You know, you talked about finding the middle ground in your current context and this fairly polarized world that we live in at the moment. But if you physically think of a coin, there's that thin edge around the outside, which is connected to both sides. And how many people operate in that space? Because actually, it's a really interesting one. It's a powerful one. That's quite binary. And so the other image that popped into my head almost simultaneously was a diamond. You know, all of those different multifaceted perspectives that are looking out in different ways, or we can look at it in different ways, but it's all part of this sparkly thing. You know, how can we embrace the fact that all of the people around us are part of that diamond, that different multifaceted thing that we as leaders can bring together and position in a way that is going to really support us co-creating the results that we want to create, right? That, to me, I've just inspired myself. It's like, oh, that's exciting. How can I apply that concept to what I do? This idea of a diamond.
No,
This is what I do. I get playful with ideas and go, oh, that's a possibility, right? How can I support other people to see that possibility and own some of that for themselves and get engaged with it in a way that they feel that they can be themselves, that they can, you know, contribute, that they can be playful or serious, if that is the, you know, if that's,
100%.
yeah, love it. Sorry. Again, I just
No,
won't.
don't apologise, because all of this,
My
I
thing.
think I say we might use different metaphors, but we're saying the same thing, I think, which is that giving people space to be themselves, giving people the ability to, you know, to not to kill this metaphor, but to shine, you know. Uh, and again, this might not be a fact, but I think that all diamonds are completely unique. You know, like, I don't think that you get different. I don't think you get diamonds that are exactly the same. Naturally occurring diamonds, I believe, are all completely unique. But you know, I think that's the point, right? Is that everyone is. If we're talking about leadership, if we're talking about how we are our true selves, if we talk about that authenticity, so much of that comes down to the unique needs of an individual, and how we as leaders give them space to shine. Like, how do you give people that space to be true to themselves? How do you give yourself space to be true to yourself? And how do you create that magic, right? Because that's all we're trying to do. You know, whatever we do day to day, we want people to be happy doing it. We want to be happy doing it, and we want to make sure that the people we work with are as happy, because, you know, there's nothing worse than you know, someone who sucks the joy out of a situation because they're deeply unhappy with what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I was just chuckling to myself then, because my go-to quote just popped into my head as you were speaking. You know, the Marianne Williamson, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all born to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And it's my grounding go-to quote, but it encapsulates everything that we've spoken about. Because if we as leaders can find that catalyst to enable whoever it is around us to own their own light. My goodness, what change could happen in individuals, in teams, in organizations, in the world, because people just have the permission to be themselves.
100%.
Yeah, the heart of the matter, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Space to shine, own your light. If that's one thing that people take away.
Yeah.
We've spoken probably around in lots of ellipses and circles, but I think, as I said, that is exactly it, right? How do we allow ourselves to be so that others can be too?
That feels like a really nice place to pause and to open up the floor to questions, to give everybody the opportunity to just explore this concept a little bit more, whatever you've taken away from our conversation. So I'm going to press pause, Anne, and the recording, and then we'll open the space for questions.